my April wrap up, almost said March, April wrap up, and I read 10 books this month, so it was a slight step down for me, but that is okay. And I actually also got, or started using, I guess, Net Galley is the better way to say it. I have had a Net Galley account for a long time. I had to have one for a free bonus thing I got for pre-ordering a Katie McGarry book years ago. So I used it, and I actually got approved for a lot of stuff. Like, I need to slow down on requesting, because I initially requested a bunch of stuff thinking I wouldn't get approved, and I've gotten approved for almost everything. So I do have some Net Galley books in here. So the first book I read was an ebook. I had been waiting for this forever. I was on hold for it from my library. I had heard about this from the Smart Bitches podcast, whatever it's called now. I think Amanda had recommended it, and that was The Ones Who Got Away by Ronnie Lauren. And I gave this 4 stars. I really, really liked it. It's the first book in a series. As of right now, there are 2 scheduled, basically. I'm hoping there's going to be 4. I feel like that's what makes sense. We'll see. It's a contemporary romance. It's pretty heavy on emotion and angst. Murphy! It follows people who were victims of a school shooting like 12 years earlier. So it's actually a really timely book. This came out in January though. So it's not like a response or anything. It's just eerily timely. There was a shooting on their prom night, and now it's like it's 12 years later and them still dealing with those issues. It was definitely an emotional roller coaster. I cried. But it's a really beautiful story, and I think Ronnie Lauren handles the whole shooting aspect really, really well. And as of the time of reading this, I was really looking forward to the next one, which comes out in June, but I actually got approved for it on Net Galley, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. So then I read my first Net Galley book, and that was The Love Coupon by Ainsley Patton. There's the cover. It's a cute cover. I gave this 3 stars. It's like a contemporary romance, I would say. It's actually the second book in a series, but it's one of those series where it doesn't really matter. Like, you're gonna spoil a couple, but it's a romance, you know they're coupling. I liked the second half of the book better than the first half. Like, there was just, it was hard to connect to the characters. That still kind of ran through, but it was especially hard in the first half. The POVs were kind of hard to distinguish, like, whose head I was in, which is weird because these characters are supposed to be very different from each other, so you would think that their voices would be different, but they weren't. There is like a whole coupon aspect to it, like those things that you can do for like a significant other or your mom or whatever, where it's like, I'll take out the dishes or clean the dishes or whatever, and they give you the coupon and you do it. That kind of stuff. That stuff is cute. The hero, Tom, was an introvert, which I really liked, and I thought he was a pretty good introvert. And then I read Talk Sweetly to Me by Courtney Milan, and this is book 4.5 in the Brother Sinister series, so this is the last Brother Sinister book. And I gave it 4 stars. It was a really cute and fun novella, and this series has been like pretty intense, so it was kind of fun to have like a more lighthearted story. Now the heroine is African American. She's not African American, she lives in Britain. But she's like of African descent, so that does play a part in the story, is this idea of an interracial marriage, or potential marriage, I guess, interracial relationship, and what that would mean for both of them. And I thought that was interesting, and how she did address that, which it's a lot, like them as characters, that all of that in one story and like a little novella is a lot. And the hero is Irish Catholic, and I am a sucker for an Irishman, and as somebody who was raised Catholic, I have like an ingrained sympathy for Irish Catholics all the time. And the heroine, she's super smart. She's into like astronomy and math. She's like a computer. If I haven't seen Hidden Figures, but I've read the book, and like, so those women are computers. And so that's kind of what she is, and it's really fascinating. And Courtney Milan like has her explain things, which goes over my head. I am not a math and science person, but I'm so glad it was in the story because it helped it feel more real, because that is how she would talk. And like the hero would get wrapped up in her, like just loving seeing her passion, and I was the same way reading it. And really this novella just made me like smile and laugh the whole time. I loved it. It was just like a really nice novella. And then I had another Net Galley book, and it was Lyrical Lights by Maria Lacera, I think. Ooh, this one I gave 2 stars. It's a contemporary romance. My issue with this is that it had so much potential. I had requested this because after reading the synopsis, I mean the cover is very cute, but after reading the synopsis I like had to have it because the heroine is a model and she is actually deaf. And I just think that's like, I love reading about like characters with different like disabilities. I feel like that's the best word I can use. I don't know. Whatever it is, like Lord knows I love myself some like physical scars because I'm weird like that. So I think it's interesting. And then he is a photographer, but her hearing like hardly ever came up, which isn't a bad thing. Like I like the idea that like it's not a huge impact on her life, because that's great and that's how you should look at it. But when it's kind of a selling point in your synopsis and then it would like conveniently show up whenever we needed like additional conflict, it just feels kind of bleh. And the characters, like the romance, it was really immature, and the hero has been married before, so it's like, not that you have to be mature to have gone through that, but I would like to think that you develop some sort of maturity along the way. Like the whole not talking to each other thing was to the extreme, so I just didn't like that. And honestly I probably would have DNF'd this if I hadn't gotten it from Net Galley and wasn't going to review it. And then I continued on in my Bridgerton reread, and I reread An Offer from a Gentleman by Julia Quinn, which this has always been one of my favorite Bridgerton novels, which is really funny because it's a Cinderella story and I'm actually not a huge fan of Cinderella stories. I've just never been a big fan. I think a lot of times in them Cinderella has like no agency, and that's my issue. So yeah, I gave it 4 stars. I still did really enjoy it. It's historical romance, and this is the 3rd Bridgerton book. It follows Benedict Bridgerton and a girl named Sophie. Benedict I found to be a little overbearing. I feel like this is what I'm seeing in my Bridgerton rereads, is I'm seeing some slightly problematic characteristics, especially in the male characters, but I think they were more common in like the early 2000s. But Sophie is fantastic. She's sassy and she definitely does have agency, and additionally the Bridgerton family is just what I'm here for. I love the Bridgertons. Like Violet and her as like a matriarch, and then the way she just like welcomes people like little ducklings into her home is just awesome. And then I had another book from Net Galley. I'm telling you, I was getting approved for everything. It's ridiculous. And that was this. It's For Crosby by Jay Nathan. I gave this 2 stars. I'm not having the best of luck with Net Galley books, but you know, it's fine. It is the 3rd book in a series, but again, it's kind of one of those ones where you don't really have to read them. It's I guess I would call it kind of new adulty, and it's a hockey romance. Like the hero is a hockey player. He's actually new to the school, and she finds him tied up to a tree naked, and it's kind of an enemies to lovers story, but I don't think it's a very well done one. Like I don't feel the chemistry there between the characters. Once they start becoming more of a couple, I feel like there's a little more chemistry, but when they're just like fighting all the time, it makes no sense. So like a lot of it just felt forced. Like maybe it needed more development, like some like 10,000 more words and some more editing. It left some unanswered, unexplained things that I wasn't happy with. And then I read The Day of the Duchess by Sarah McLean, which is the third book, right? Yes, in her Scandal and Scoundrel series, and I gave this 4 stars. This is historical romance, and it's a reunited lovers story, which is actually what I did my tropes video on for April. So it's about a husband and a wife who've been separated for several years, so you've kind of gotten like little teases of their story throughout the prior books, especially mainly the first one, I think. And it reminds me a lot of a book by Julia London, which I had recommended in that video, the tropes video, which is The Book of Scandal, and I think that's a much better version of this kind of story. They're not the exact same, but they're very similar and have similar story points in a lot of ways. I did struggle to be sympathetic with the characters, especially the heroine Sarah. Like I felt like she was a little too harsh on Malcolm, the hero. Like, calm down for a second. But I was really intrigued by the side characters, and there's one, Felicity, who I'm super pumped because Sarah McLean's next book, which is actually the start of a new series, is gonna have Felicity in it, so I'm very excited about that, and that comes out in June, so that's like right around the corner. And then, like I said, Net Galley approved me to review this, and that is The One You Can't Forget by Ronnie Lauren. So this is the second book in the Ones Who Got Away series. Oh my gosh. I give this 5 wonderful stars. My review will be up in June as requested by the publisher, because that is when it comes out. This is a contemporary romance. The heroine is one who escaped that shooting, and oh my gosh, this was just such a good book. Like, it was the right amount of emotion. I loved the romance. I loved the characters. It like worked its way under my skin and like just ate at me and made me think, and it's what you want out of a book, I feel like. And again, the way things like the shooting and everything were handled were just perfect. It was respectful, but addressed issues and everything. I loved it. And then I read The Epidemic by Suzanne Young. So this is the 4th book in the program series, but it's like the 2nd book in the prequel duology. This series is really confusing. And I gave this 4 stars. It's young adult-ish, trigger warning for suicide, depression, probably other things too I can't think of. It is dark. Like, if you've read the program, then I would say the program is worse than this, but I thought this was interesting. It had like a pretty compelling mystery, but because it's a prequel, it kind of takes some of the mystery out of it. I think that the program is just like a superior novel. And there are 2 more books that come after the program duology. I'm not sure if I'm going to read them or not. If you have read any of them, I don't know if they're both out or not. Let me know what you thought and if I should read them. And then the last book I read this month was Hello Stranger by Lisa Kleypas, and this is the 4th book in her Ravenel's series, which is like her return to historical romance. I gave this 4 stars. The heroine is a doctor, so you have met her in previous books. She is the first/only female doctor, and she is inspired by like a real female doctor who I think I read the author's note, but I don't remember what it said. Might have been the first. I think she was. Hero is great. He's so kind and sweet and everything, and the heroine is great too. Like, she's smart, but she's like her own person. She's not just doctory robot or anything. There was some suspense which kept me on the edge of my seat, but I think I'm having trouble dealing with suspense. I don't know if maybe I just read too many kind of serious in tone books close to each other, and that was what the issue was. But I did have some trouble like emotionally handling the suspense, so this book took me a lot longer to read than it normally would have. And the romance was super cute. They had, Ethan and Garrett are the main character, the hero and the heroine. They had great interactions. I loved it. And that is my April wrap up. I'm very excited with how the month went, and I am excited for May. If you've read any of these and have anything you want to say or you want to recommend any books, feel free to do so down in the comments. And thanks so much for watching.